Yes? I brought a new girl for the school. Right.
Hi everyone! Today we'll be diving into La Residencia, or The House That Screamed, directed by Narciso Ibáñez Serrador in 1969, a film that stands as a landmark piece in Spanish cinema for its subversive use of horror to reflect on the hidden struggles of the people during this time. At a first glance, La Residencia appears to be a classic Gothic horror story, but beneath that eerie facade is a deeply nuanced film that challenges authoritarian power, traditional gender roles, and sexual repression during Francisco Franco's dictatorship in Spain from 1939 to 1975. The film was released amid Franco's repressive regime, and while we may never truly know what Serrador's fully realized idea for the film was due to censorship, it still managed to get its key themes and messages across in an effective and captivating way. Serrador was born in Uruguay in 1935 with Spanish heritage, and in 1947 he moved to Spain at the age of 12. The political climate of this period was bleak, with nationalist dictator Franco dominating all of the 20th century Spain until 1975. His dictatorship was characterized by the brutal repression and censorship and the severe control that ensued. Navigating censorship through subtextual feminist and queer themes, while reflecting on the economic landscape of Spain at the time, particularly the opening of trade and a need for international film revenue as a steady source of income being represented through the Spanish-English quality of the film. La Residencia serves as a compelling reflection of Francoist Spain's repressive socio-political landscape.
By highlighting the intersection of economic globalization, the Spanish horror boom, its atmospheric and Gothic-style cinematography and metaphorical framing, La Residencia demonstrates how creative direction and storytelling allowed the film to subversively operate within the constraints of Francoist censorship.
Let me walk you through how this film uses censorship as a creative playground where repressed feminist and queer themes lie within the film's context, as well as a political surveillance and economic motivations collide once the movie was released. The Francoist context. Censorship as structure. First, let's place ourselves in 1969 Spain. His government continued to suppress many diverging identities and any sort of disapproval for his regime and beliefs. People of Basque and Catalonian nationality, LGBT people, and women were constantly fighting for their own rights and liberty. Yet Franco continued to force his vision of one language, religion, and general way of life onto the Spanish people. This suppression, of course, leaked into the media, especially entertainment. Despite the improving technology of filmmaking and growing population, Franco could not have the Spanish people influenced by any ideals not advocated by himself. So, he created a system of censorship. This censorship in the media remained strict as the filmmakers themselves wanted to stay safe, but also weren't being allowed to represent certain topics and themes in film. The National Commission of Film Censorship was established in 1938 and heavily patrolled what was and what was not allowed in cinema. Set in France during the mid-19th century, the film cleverly distanced itself from Spain geographically and within the time period it was made. This detachment allowed Serrador to effectively disguise political commentary as period horror without raising any immediate suspicions from the NCFC. The school in the film functions almost as a metaphor for Spain, obsessed with obedience, purity, and conformity. We also see commentary on surveillance through Madame Fourneau's intense rule over the students. The women are constantly watched and punished by both their superior and with one another. The girls berate each other when one breaks the rules, and, for most of the film, we believe that Madame Fourneau's is the ultimate watcher.
However, as the film progresses, we begin to see how another form of surveillance is at play through Luis, the son of the headmistress. In his free time, he peeks into the women's rooms and showers while they change, embodying the Francoist patriarchy's ideal male gaze. This reveal introduces a new threat to the girls in the house, male supervision, that manifests itself in a perverted and invasive way.
Image 4 shows the repressive nature of upholding traditional female characteristics. In this shot, it presents a very feminine activity on the surface. Looking even further, this scene shows the exhaustive nature of every woman forced to do the same exact movements, much like women during the regime are forced to act in the same exact way, and are punished if they diverge.
continue tomorrow.
This pressure parallels that put on women by the regime. At this time, the Spanish, especially the women, were being forced to align with traditional and more ideal standards of femininity, oftentimes with force or violence. Luis's gaze serves as a subtle reminder of this watch over women and inability for them to live freely under Franco. Luis pines for this perfect woman by murdering and collecting pieces of female students.
You see?
And while it is disturbing, it is a profound representation of the dictatorship's desire to use force and violence to create the ideal Spain.
Image 2. Male surveillance, implied nudity. This scene and the entire movie revolve around Luis constantly watching the girls of the house. Within this scene, we see Luis peering through a ventilation duct into the women's shower room. Luis tends to watch these girls, especially in moments of privacy.
Get out! Hurry up! Mademoiselle, you can get out.
In the scene, he watches them while they shower, emphasizing how even in the house for the girls and run by a woman, they are still constantly under male surveillance.
Even though they put so much stress on creating this unified, homogeneous Spain, they still allowed the queer undertones of the film to slip through the cracks. Author Ada Dominguez notes that the censorship board found the lesbian aspects of the film gravely dangerous, yet still allowed them to be included. This controversy ended up achieving the opposite goal of the dictatorship, drawing more of a crowd to see the film. It was the highest grossing film of the year.
Economic globalization. Horror for export. An equally important aspect that occurred once the film was released is money. La Residencia was among the first Spanish horror films made with an international audience in mind, especially the English-speaking market. That's why you'll find versions titled The House That Screamed or The Finishing School, depending on where you're from. The film, despite being crafted by a Spanish director, was forced to have it detached from Spain and the dictatorship, leaving it with a unique setting. The filmmakers thought that this sort of film was more detached from Spain and would become more attractive to overseas audiences if it was set in English. However, the French setting and English dialogue don't take away the fact that La Residencia is a Spanish film, as the film's commentary is directly inspired by the socio-political conflicts in Spain at this time. Image 5. The purity of religion and Franco. This early scene is a shocking, subtle commentary that can be used on the struggles with religious repression. This scene is one of the most echoing examples of commentary under Franco. While not allowed to directly state his opinions, Serrador uses raw cuts back and forth between two very different scenes. One, we see the epitome of proper female behavior, while the next scene shows the reality of this standard, one that is terrifying and oppressive.
Get your hands off me! No! Let go! Oh! Get off me, you bitches! Get off!
Hurry up, mademoiselle, it's late. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
Thou art our refuge and our shelter. Thou shalt be our shield and our strength. In your protection we shall find peace and things that appear at night, nor sudden death or injury which may befall, and we pray for thine eternal presence. Suffering and harm.
As commentary of the dictatorship at this time, one that enables men to subject women and one that represses women into conforming to traditional female norms. Despite both young men and women in the film have intense sexual desires, this clearly represents the contrast in perception from one sex to another.
Spain's attempt to create a new Spanish cinema ended up being a commercial disaster, leaving the film industry in massive debt, 300 million pesetas to be exact, from the expensive programs and protection systems enacted by the government. Therefore, something needed to change. Serrador and many other filmmakers found a solution in horror, a genre that was criticized as being a worse and more degenerate genre from others. However, it was proving to be very financially profitable, especially within the American and English markets in the 60s. Serrador cleverly created La Residencia to appeal to these markets and gain success while still maintaining the Spanishness of the film, critiquing the regime that was keeping his film restrained. It's ironic. The very thing that represented the film, Francoist Spain, also funded it generously because it could make money overseas.
Feminist and queer subtext. Subversion in the shadows. Women at this time were being sexualized around the world, catering to the male gaze. This greatly extended into Spanish cinema. La Residencia offers a twist to this expectation. It's set in an all-female French girls' school, with the regime constantly pushing and forcing filmmakers to portray the ideal Spanish woman. Image 3. Escaping censorship. This shot plays a scene where one of the girls, who has snuck out to meet the lumberjack. However, the scene does not show the girl having sex with the lumberjack. It instead focuses on the girls as they sew, with frustrated, hyper-focused expressions. There is a tension that suggests a sort of sexual frustration or envy. In this shot, the needle and thread are used to depict a sexual innuendo, paired with the audio of only one girl moaning, where the real drama unfolds between women. But the hidden oppression from men ensues. Female characters gaze at one another with a fearful or disturbing intimacy, one that can be interpreted as not sexual, given the repression of LGBT during this time, but it is clear that these are not mere friendly glances, rather they are quiet rebellions against heteronormative structure. Characters like Thérèse and Irene exhibit power dynamics that are both controlling and charged with tension. Desire is suggested in whispered conversation and watchful eyes, all while cloaked in plausible deniability. These characters are not simply enemies. The encounter, while abusive, also had a teasing element to it that focused on Thérèse and Irene's sexuality. Scene 1. This scene takes place around halfway through the film. It is a great representation of control and image under Franco, as well as subliminal sexuality and erotic lesbian themes. Thérèse, in this scene, is berated by Irene for her mother's position as a prostitute. This adds to the film's oppressive atmosphere, with Thérèse being teased by the other girls for her mother's job.
Oh, how interesting. Bring us a tea. What is the Tivoli, Thérèse, dear? What is the Tivoli, Teresa?
It's a cabaret.
A cabaret? But those places are only for prostitutes. Is your mother one? Teresa, I'm asking if your mother is a prostitute.
No, she isn't.
I think she is.
No, she's a singer, that's all.
Your mother's a prostitute.
No.
Like all the women who go to those kind of places. Don't
No.
deny it.
No, I
She
promise.
is.
Oh,
I think she
please,
is. Don't
no,
tell me lies.
no.
Your mother is a prostitute.
No, she isn't.
Don't
She
talk
is.
nonsense because I know
She
very
isn't.
well.
No, she's
The mother of
not.
Mademoiselle is an honest lady. All she does is sing.
No.
Sing for the gentlemen who come to see her. And to sing, she wears these sort of clothes, right?
Stop.
Yes, I think this is your
Please.
mother's, isn't it?
No.
Of course it is.
No.
I found it in your trunk. It's just like the one you gave Helene. This was really a theatrical costume. Now put it on. Put it on. Put it on.
No, I won't.
You wouldn't like Madame to find out it's you who sees her son in the afternoon, and all the girls to know what kind of work your mother does. Now put it on! You will put it on!
Oh, please. Please.
This also critiques the social stigma against female sexuality, emphasizing it through the torture at the hands of the other woman. Irene encapsulates the repressive nature of Franco's fascist regime, subjugated by her environment to become a perfect woman, and while actively repressing her true desires. It drives her to become a sadist as she practices her desires in a violent and secretive manner. Initially, Serrador's character is not allowed to be sympathized with by the audience. Her sadistic manner is far too out of line with the requirements to be acceptable as a woman under Franco. However, Serrador flips this expectation on its head when Irene, consumed by her infatuation for Thérèse, becomes the film's new heroine. This is a quote from Indiscreet Fantasies. Aidan also appears to take up a distorted form of the young hero seeking to rescue the Gothic heroine, the distortion arising from the fact that such heroes are traditionally pure and noble. End quote. She doesn't simply replace the role of Therese, but more so seeks to find her. Aidan's character then becomes more fleshed out as she no longer assumes a flat secondary antagonist that screams simplistic messages of independent-minded women bad. Rather, her character becomes what echoes the meaning of the message. However, it is obvious to the modern eye that if it was not for the film being produced during this repressive regime,
this lesbian sexuality did not go unnoticed by moviegoers and critics. Lemma Hincapie and Dominic note how Irene's lascivious-looked and sexually tinged torment brings her pleasure and creates multiple subtle moments of connection, fear, and desire that would have otherwise been censored outright. What's brilliant is that Serador hides these themes in plain sight. Lesbian undertones and feminist rebellion exist as shadows, just like the film's cinematography. Stark contrasts, dim corridors, and voyeuristic camera angles. At times, the viewer feels just as perverted as they watch the intimate scenes unfold, leaving you disturbed and pushed into the back of your seat, yet unable to look away.
Surveillance and Power, Gothic Aesthetics as Critique. Now let's talk style. The cinematography in La Residencia does more than create atmosphere. It reinforces the regime's obsession with surveillance and control. Tight framing, winding long corridors, the staircase encompassing a clear hierarchy, every shot feels claustrophobic as we peer into the lives of this disturbed school. Citation from La Zorro Rebel, Spanish horror film. This book outlines how these stylistic choices weren't just for scares, they were loaded with metaphor. The horror is systemic, not just personal. And the use of the Gothic aesthetics was not accidental. It allowed Serador to embed critiques of authoritarianism in a way that felt safe under censorship. Conclusion. To wrap up, La Residencia is a masterclass in working within constraints to reveal greater truths. Its feminist, queer, politically loaded, and economically strategic aspects all wrapped in eerie candlelight and Gothic hallways. The film conceals a greater commentary under its submersive messaging. Serador, through horror, tells a very real story about women, control, and desire, without ever saying it directly. Serador utilizes Madame Fourneau as his representation of repression, and only could produce the film if still upholding proper female behavior. Furthermore, he could only represent Irene's sexuality when under the guise of control and horror. Serador was able to sneak past censorship by setting the geographical and temporal locations of the film far detached from Spain and the regime. This is one of the strongest elements of the film, as it opens up for much more commentary and non-Franco-approved themes as if needed. The film can be manipulated into an idea that actually supports Francoist ideology. It is difficult as a viewer, nearly 60 years later, to watch this film as the original context feels skewed and much more obvious. The power of hindsight allows one to see the real nature of the film and what exactly Serador desired to portray. This makes La Residencia a product of its time, in correspondence to the specific circumstances that allowed Serador to produce anything with more creative value, this being due to the economic environment and necessity to produce international films. La Residencia could not be produced today, as the controversial nature of these ideas are not as nearly taboo as they would have been 60 years ago. And that is the brilliance of this film.